Welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, the podcast that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dickson and I'm a professional sales and marketing recruiter. I love what I do, but my biggest frustration is seeing too many people not realizing their career potential. In this podcast, I'll introduce you to my network, an amazing group of business leaders in the biggest tier 1 organizations through to some super fast growth SMEs. They'll share their career journey and give unique advice and insights on managing your career and leading a function and a business. Join me, Mike Dickson of AXR Recruitment and Search, to help guide your future in sales and marketing. In this episode, we meet Imran Khan, Managing Director of TCC Distributors. Imran's mantra is to own your own development every day because, as a senior leader once said to him, nobody else really cares. Enjoy. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Sales and Marketing Director Incubator, the program that helps you make great career decisions to maximize your potential. My name is Mike Dickson, Director of Sales, Marketing and Category here at AXR Recruitment and Search. And today in the Incubator, I'm joined by Imran Khan, Managing Director of TCC Distributors. Good morning, Imran. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here. Appreciate you having me in.
Fantastic. Well, really looking forward to our conversation this morning. Lots to get into. Imran, let's get into it. So same question I've asked everybody this year so far about brand. What's your favorite brand, and you can't pick one that you've worked on?
Okay. Probably a couple of years ago, I would have said Qantas because of what they stand for. I love to travel. I think they're ubiquitous with Australian culture and their slogan, the spirit of Australia. But I think they've fallen off the radar the last couple of years. So I'm going to go with Lego. And I think it's a heritage brand, but I just love the way that they've continued to modernize themselves more recently. They almost went bankrupt. I don't know if everyone knows, about 2 decades ago. But then I think the job they've done to keep relevant as consumers change by being true to who they are, I really admire.
Yeah, and they've really developed the kind of seems like they've gone to core, right? It's just like technical. More and more kind of just intricacy of Lego as opposed to the kind of brand extension that seems to be done.
Yeah, you look at it and I think they tried to brand extend into things like theme parks and other areas, it almost sunk them. But what they realized is by being true to who they are and what they stood for, and focusing on that and finding other ways to make that relevant. Like you look at the things they do now in licensing as an example. You're right, the Technics, all the other more complex, and also the junior versions of what they do. It's a great story, I think, in terms of a company really focusing in on what they're good at and saying no to things they could do that kind of lose the essence of who they are.
Yeah.
But that, by remaining true to what they do and do well, they've managed to maintain success over a long period of time.
Right, and next question before we get into your career. Obviously, big morning this morning for Australia in the World Cup. Managed to knock off Denmark, which I wasn't expecting.
No.
But who's going to win?
Good question. Not Australia, as passionate as I'm about Australian sport, but I think despite the result this morning, I'm going to back the French in. I think the first couple of games they played were probably the benchmark over what each of the teams have put out there. So I'll go with France for now.
Yeah, and there's a couple of big guys are falling over, aren't they? But it's funny when this is obviously people listen to this back in months to come. Yeah. Like, what did you say France for? They didn't get past the 16. But no one seems to be dominant at the moment. It could be quite an open World Cup, but it'll play out. We'll see what comes. But cool. Well, I'm really keen to get into your career, Imran, and we'll start with the kind of the early days, because I'm always curious as to someone's kind of pathway in. You were at uni at Newcastle.
Yep.
Did you go straight into FMCG, or how did you kind of get into that kind of sales type career?
Yeah. I did go straight in, but I had a gap year up in the Whitsundays. So finished university, 3 years at university was quite stressful. So, I needed a break. And me and two friends went and lived in Airlie Beach for a year. And it was always a stopgap measure of a life experience along the journey. And then, once I came back from there, which was around the time of the 2000 Olympics, the idea was to get into a sales type role. And I think, still it was back then, I think still today, FMCG has many great entry level opportunities to get into, particularly in sales. And so, that was my path into a sales analyst role.
Yeah, I'd love to know what happened in Airlie Beach for maybe what's not in the early stages in the early, possibly. Because I have skipped through people's careers a bit quickly this season and focusing more on the organizational kind of journey. But actually, I want to kind of almost reprise it because I just like the way you put your career together. So, and I think it's a really nice reminder to our listeners of what is that pathway to senior leadership. And there's lots of kind of summary points I want to just kind of leave people with as they go into their Christmas break. So now you kind of started at Arnott's. You were there for a big chunk of your career. Now was I guess good choice was it, or were you kind of weighing up different businesses? Or
well, interestingly, this is the part that a lot of people don't know about. It is I actually started with a company called Snack Brands Australia, who many people know today. And I was actually acquired into the Arnott's business when Arnott's bought that business. So I didn't actually start out with Arnott's.
Right.
So it was about 18 months after I'd started that Arnott's acquired it. And so that was actually my entry into the Arnott's business at that point.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that was a path, but and did you kind of in the even early days think, right, I look at the sales director and that's who I want to be, or is that just so far away when you're back at the beginning?
Yeah, I think when you're back at the beginning, you look at the roles like the sales director and you go, oh, that looks like fun, or there's a lot of exposure and they have a lot of scope in those roles. But it is, I think, from an aspirational realizing it, it probably took me 10 years. So, it was kind of sort of probably 18 years to get to that role eventually. But it was halfway mark in that journey where I started to go, actually, that might be a realistic ambition. So, yes, certainly at the start, because you had, I was an entry-level sales analyst, no experience whatsoever. And so for me, things like, getting into a customer team or fronting the customer, getting into category, those things were all seen as big steps far beyond your experience base at that stage.
I'm curious as to that kind of mindset shift, and because you meet some people who are young and they're so goal orientated and I want to run the company and some of it's very unrealistic and some of it's like admirable in terms of the ambition. But for you, it's like this almost like this 10-year journey of realization to kind of get to this point. Going, actually, I could. Maybe that is for me. Was that kind of something you arrived at yourself, or did you have people kind of helping you with that goal setting?
Yeah, I think I've always thought about how can I do the best that I can and see where that takes me. So I never had my mind in the early days set on aspiring to be a sales director, but I think as I got closer to that role over time, I did. But my mantra was always do the best you can, continue to try and develop yourself to the best of your ability, and you'll go as far as you can as an individual if you take that approach. So I think the goal for me was always about self-improvement, different experiences, and the backdrop of that being, if I can develop myself and gain enough experiences and keep going down that path, then hopefully, yes, that will arrive. But I wasn't because I know some people who've, like you've just mentioned, who go, I need to be a sales director by the time I'm X age, or I want to be this type of role by that age. But it's not inherently who I am. But I think what's important, even for those people, is that's a great aspiration. But what are you doing to develop yourself and build the experiences to get there? Because it's great to make a statement like that, but ultimately just making that statement isn't going to realize that ambition for you. So you've got to figure out, what do I need to do to improve my skills and experience base to realize that ambition?
I remember a previous guest we had on, Caroline Waite, who is now at Sanofi, back then was at Frucor a couple of years back. And she made a really interesting point in the same vein, which was you sometimes you hear from somebody in their annual review, I want to be you, Caroline, I want your role. And then for the rest of the year, nothing.
Yeah.
And there's no behaviors, there's no plan, there's nothing that demonstrates that actually that's what they want to be.
Yeah.
It's a statement that sits in isolation,
which
is not very powerful, really. And the more you say it with the lack of evidence, the less powerful it becomes as time goes on.
I mean, the way I think about it is even the most senior leaders in every business have development areas. No one's perfect. No one has things that they don't need to work on. And that's as true at the start of your career as it is the further and further you progress through it. And I think those people who have the aspiration, but more importantly, have a huge self-awareness of themselves and then take ownership of that development behind it. For me, I think they're the people you see genuinely making progression. I think, people can rely on individual talent for a period of time, I believe. I think everyone's got an inherent level that they can get to in that. But the ones that really accelerate or really achieve, it's because they look at that self-awareness and go, what do I need to improve? How do I need to build my skill sets? What's the experience I'm going to give myself so that I can over time take on, roles of broader responsibility and accountability?
Yeah, absolutely. A few moves in your career stand out for me. And it's often the kind of non-linear, interesting ones that do stand out when I look at someone's resume, and I see a lot of resumes. So for the first one for me is you were a national account manager in Woolies, often the NAM role that people want to do. You then moved to Indies. And actually, as a recruiter today, that's a more common move.
Yeah. People
are actively seeking that kind of move. Back then, that wasn't. Tell us about your thinking back then.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate early in my career. There was a couple of managers I had. So Chris Baddick, who's now the CEO of ALM for Metcash, Chris Gillard, who's the MD of Remedy, and Adrian Lovell, who's the his commercial strategy at Pernod Ricard. And what they all encouraged me to do in that respect was get breadth. They really encouraged me to go, how do you broaden the experiences you get, and particularly in things like people leadership? Because as you get into more roles of increasing responsibility, it becomes more about the way you lead people than the way you do things. I was fortunate to have a couple of these mentors early in my career. When I was presented with the opportunity to go from India, it was exactly right on face value. I had a $100 million portfolio on Woolworths, and I'd been offered a $15 million portfolio on
1.5.
1.5 on independence. People were going, looking at me going, why would you consider that? Well, when you look below the role title and the revenue, the Woolworths role was a national account manager role. So it was, very similar to what, people are doing today in terms of individual contributing. It was in a portfolio that I'd worked on for a number of years. So I'd worked in snacking and impulse for a period of time. While it was a big business and a great role, there was a degree of familiarity, and I'd worked a few years on Woolworths at that time. When you looked under the hood of the independence role, it was on categories in a business I'd never worked on. So, the purchase drivers, the makeup of the portfolio, the competitive positions, the complexity and breadth of the portfolio are actually quite different to what I was doing before. The other one was it had a team of 5 direct reports. So, it was pretty rare to have a business that would support that kind of structure of account management on a small revenue base. So, for me, it wasn't about the revenue. It was about the skills and experience that I could get. And, I think that's sometimes a mistake I think people can make early on in their career is, look at the title of a role. Actually, what matters is the skills and experience you get out of it, because, as you go forward in your career and you face situations, you don't you don't lean back on, oh, I had this title. You lean back on, hang on, in this situation, this is the experience I had or the skills I leveraged or, how I overcame that. So really understanding the skill build and the experience of the role rather than just the title, I think was really important to me. And I was fortunate that I had some good coaching on that early, but that was definitely one of the moves that I look back on and go, that was a great opportunity for you to, learn different businesses, learn different categories, and also develop your people management skills.
Yeah, really good sound decision making. I think, nowadays we're seeing it. Appetite is definitely growing for that type of move, and I hope that the podcast and incubator is having some positive impact because we're really driving that message hard, which don't just stick in your lane. You've got to gather breadth of experience and look beyond the job title. Guys, actually we're going to be producing our 2023 salary guides quite soon. They'll be coming out in January. A lot of the messaging in our salary guides is all around differentiating what goes on in each role in terms of responsibilities. But, we also point to trends. And one of the trends last year we pointed out was just a growing role of national account manager. And it's getting bigger and bigger. It spans more and more things. And it actually almost eliminates the need to, seek new titles because people are doing 2, 3, 4 NAN roles, and that's fine because they're all different and they're all broad. And they're growing within those roles as well now, which, so I think it's enabling that to happen a bit more easily. Now, the other move I want to talk to as well is you kind of grew in that indie space, leading the indies function, then moved to category. The indies, brilliant as it is, isn't the most sophisticated channels in terms of data and category and insight. Still not the case, but it's getting there. I think definitely shifting. So that was quite, again, a big move to make. How did that happen?
Again, it came to what sat within the role rather than the title. So, I hadn't led a category function before, but I'd had obviously experience with it with my time on all the organised grocery customers. But what that role entailed also was it sat given the structure of our organisation, that role sat on the business unit leadership team for the Campbell's business. So I was in a sales function in a category role, but I actually represented all of sales at the leadership of the business level. Now we had in that business there was Arnott's and Campbell's, so Campbell's was a smaller part, but just the opportunity to contribute to the business and the driving forward of it at that leadership level, it was too good to pass up really, because there's again when you think about building skills and experiences, that was a great way to get a seat at the table of how are we going to make decisions for this business. How are we going to set the strategies for this business? What are the plans we're going to develop for the entire market? Because I think that's one of the great things I think about category roles is depending on the structure of an organisation, but a category has to be customer agnostic. So a lot of roles as you grow up in sales are actually customer focused. So you're thinking about how do I win with this customer? Whereas in category, what you're looking at is how do I win in the market? So how do I get multiple stakeholders in the market on board with a plan that not only grows the category, but also wins with them? So it does allow you to broaden your thinking a lot more, I think, than just being focused. Because I think you can, if you spend a lot of time on a customer, you can get quite focused on that customer and their needs. I think roles in category tend to take you out of that mindset or force you to come out of that mindset and really think market wide, and then how do you apply strategies to the market?
Yeah, we're going to do a session next year as incubator guys on category. We haven't done enough on it, and we do a lot of work in category, but it's I think if it's anything to take, what you just said there is perfect, because that's exactly what category gives. And actually, if you think about then jumping forward to senior leadership roles, that's what you need. Is to be able to see the whole business, the whole market, not just the lane that you're in. But so you kind of then back to construction grocery into Woolies, and then over to the States, which is a huge move. And I'm really interested in that in terms of is that something you drove, or did the business encourage you? Or how did that happen?
It was a bit of both actually. So I think I got to a stage, as I said, about it was probably 10 years in, where I I guess landed on the aspiration that if I was capable enough, I'd want to do the sales director's role at Arnott's. And in that journey, obviously came development discussions. How are you going to develop the skills? What are the skills you need to develop to realise that aspiration? So I was pretty fortunate that at the particular time this was going on, I had again, I don't know whether I've picked them or I've just been lucky, but I had another really good manager in John Rosette. He's the MD of Blackmores, Australia, New Zealand at the moment. And he spent a number of years overseas in various assignments with Kellogg's. And I think I can now see it with the benefit of hindsight, but I can see what he was pushing on there, which was, if you were to move overseas, the breadth of thinking and experience you get from working in different markets will set you up really well to then be able to come and use the breadth of thinking that is required to run a large function. Because the sales director role at Arnott's is 500 people, so this is a big function and a big team. And I think you go through your career in the more junior roles, and while you might have big portfolios, the breadth of what you deal with in Australia is as big as Australia. So being transplanted from a country that has 26 million people to a market that has 330 million people, it just changes your frame of reference completely. So I was very fortunate that the company supported me in terms of, putting me in a position to try and develop, to realise the aspiration of the sales director role. And then I also got the great experience of living overseas, but broadening my experience base as well. And fortunately, after a couple of years, the circumstances arose, and I was able to come back and take on the sales director role.
Take the sales director, fantastic. Where do you live in America?
Philadelphia. So it's not one of the cities that everyone generally goes, oh, wow, Philadelphia. But it's for those who know America, it's in the Northeast corridor. So it's, less than 2 hours out of New York. You're a 6-hour flight to London. And then most of the population base of America is accessible from there. So it was a really great experience. Very underrated city. Loved every minute we were there.
Yeah. The kids come back with American accents?
My daughter still to this day gives me a null, like a rolled American no. My son's, they were 8 and 5 when we went over, and 11 and 8 we came back. So he's lost pretty much all of it.
Yeah.
My daughter still throws one out here and there.
That is brilliant. Now, when you came back, you got the role you're aiming for, the sales director. So a really interesting path to that role. Now, you inherited a business that was, certainly in terms, if you look at Advantage Survey, was not doing as well as it could. Yep. It was bottom of tag. What goals did you set for yourself when you took on the role?
Yeah, I think it was probably short term and then medium to long term. So it was 2. So I think, no one, I don't think anyone gets out of bed to go and get feedback from anyone, whether it's customer or internal stakeholders saying, we see you towards the bottom of the pile in terms of overall engagement. So for me, the very first priority I set was I need to get out and see every one of these customers and just understand why it is that they think, that's the way they view our engagement. So, the very first thing I did when I came back was for all the senior stakeholders at the key customers was to go out and just listen. What is it that we are doing now? Because, when I spoke to the team in the business, they weren't waking up each day going, how do we engage our customers in a way that, we're at the bottom of the Advantage survey. So it wasn't an intention, but it was the facts of the way our customers were seeing us. The very first part was a listening journey to understand what it was. And then once we did that, we sat there and said, right, what do we want to do? Where do we want to be? And ultimately the goal we set ourselves was we wanted to be top third. And the reason for that was, we thought to go from last or down the bottom right up to first, that was probably an unrealistic expectation because, if you think about the great companies out there, there's a lot of great companies doing great work. Particularly you look at the likes of, in our competitive set for Arnott's, we had companies, Mondelez, PepsiCo, Nestle, big multinational companies. But what we said as our starting goal was we've got to get up to that top third because, if we want to engage our customers and have a productive relationship with them, then you've got to have more people talking positively about your business than, putting you down going, actually, no, we're not sure these guys do want to partner with us. The goal was top third. And then what we did is really just set an organization-wide action plan against it.
Yeah, you got to number one though.
Yeah.
I mean, probably arrogant to say we're going to be number one, isn't it? But you got there, and so what did you manage to shift? Was it just lots of little things, or?
Yeah, I think so. There was a couple of things that the customers gave us feedback on. I think the first one was we don't feel like we can have an open dialogue with you. So if you think about dialogue and conversation, it was really trust. They were sitting there going, we don't. At the moment, we're not sure we can have an open dialogue with you and find out exactly where you're going. So it was about opening up lines of communication at all levels of the organisation, because I think you got to remember with Advantage Survey, yes, the account team is front and centre of that, but these customers see through your organisation. So they see supply chain, they feel supply chain, they feel marketing, they see marketing. So it's really about having that open dialogue and feeling that from the organisation. The second one was a category focus. At the end of the day, retailers are about growing their sales, right? And like any business, it's about growing their sales. So you've got to work with them on how you grow the categories that they participate in. And then we had some other sort of what I call operational issues that just needed some action plans that we put in place against those as well. But I think it sounds simple, but I think with a lot of working with retailers is doing the fundamentals exceptionally well all the time. They work in an environment which is a customer walks into a store today, and whatever that customer does determines their destiny. They don't have the luxury of sitting back and sort of going, let's think about the plan for going on. Like if something goes wrong in their world today, a customer walks into their store and your product isn't available on shelf for whatever the reason is, that's an issue for them and that's an issue for their brand. So, working with them on their problems and figuring out how you can partner on most of them together. Because I think one of the things when you've got big organizations is you're not always going to see eye to eye, right? But I think being able to have an open dialogue about that and putting on, hopefully finding more points of alignment than misalignment and trying to come together really strongly on those is what every organisation should aspire to do.
Well, it's a great journey. It really is. And now, fast forwarding a little bit, got to, you left and Honest in 2020-ish. Just after the sale to KKR, but, did you, as a sales director on that exec team, I can imagine that sale process is not easy, it's complex. You must play an active role in that as a member of that leadership group. What sort of role does a sales director play? It
was an incredibly demanding time because you've got, we used to say we had not only one role, we had three roles. So we had to run the business, which was your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
We then had to sell the business. And then the added complexity was keeping a team engaged, motivated, in an environment where there's uncertainty, right? Because when you're in a sale process, now we were fortunate because we had a big business that had lots of heritage and lots of success that we were selling. So the idea that the business would go away or merge, and that was that it wasn't as extreme as that. But you do have team members coming to work going, what does this mean for me? And you've got no certainty whatsoever of what that looks like. So, we really had three tasks to do that. So, on the sale process, really what you're doing, and all the functional leads play this role in the sales process, is you're communicating the value that sits in the organisation with the partners and the future value that can be created with the right strategies and plans. Because ultimately what the sellers are looking for is to get value from whatever they pay for that business. So, communicating the, I guess I call it assets, the assets you have in terms of route to market, communicating the relationships and engagement with customers, communicating where you're taking the categories, communicating where you see the broader opportunities in terms of, this business, where could it go? Where hasn't it gone and why not? And really doing that at a strategic level so that, because you're playing two roles, right? You're playing a role that is, how do you maximize the value of the sale of the company? But also for the future of the company, you may remain with that company and have to deliver on that aspiration as well. So, it's got to be, you've got to play that role of, really being clear and succinct on where the business is at on a route to market perspective, and all the engagement that goes with that, and where the opportunities lie to accelerate that path as well.
It's intense.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
that's a lot of moving parts. And
yeah,
when you left as not long after the sale, was that kind of always going to be the case, or did it depend how this who bought it? And what the outcome was?
Look, it's interesting because when I set that aspiration, what was it, sort of 10 years into my career to be the sales director at Arnott's, I also had a realization at that point that was probably going to be my last role with the company.
Right.
And the reason for that was, that business is a large business, and I didn't feel like I would build the skill sets to ever be a general manager in that business straight through a career progression path. And I was very realistic with myself about that, just saying, to be in a role of that scale, you would need to have different experiences than one I think I'll get through that company. And then once the sale came about, I was realistic on, that there would be two paths, right? One would be to stay, one would be to go. I think what I've realized with the benefit of hindsight now is just the toll that the 3-year process and 2-year process of the sale took on me. And, the time out I took after that, it was only once I started having some time out that I realized just how demanding that period had been for me and how much I needed a break.
Yeah. And you took a break, you played a bit of golf.
Yeah.
And now you're MD of TCC Distributors. Now, and not everyone will know the business. So take a moment just to give us your pitch. What is TCC do?
Yeah. So we are a unique business. So I've not come across another business in this market that does what we do. So if you sort of step away from the title distributors, so what are we here to do? We're here to accelerate growth for brands in the independent grocery channel, which is extremely complex and decentralized in its nature. So we are a specialist in the independent grocery space. What our model allows clients to do is to get far greater reach, depth, and coverage into that channel. So we do everything from strategic channel entry, top-to-top engagement, account management, all the way down to covering 900 stores every month. So it's a really, in what's a fragmented channel, we put the resources in that are required to manage that complex beast. And we do it in a way that, allows our clients to get far greater reach than they could on their own. For those trying to contextualize what it is, the best way I can describe it is, think of your own end-to-end independent account management team. So a team that does everything from the account management through to field execution. That's what we do. We just do it as an external provider. So that's the simple thing. I think the other thing I'd say is because we only operate in independence, we can skill base and resource against that channel. So, a lot of companies struggle because, the skills required to be successful in independence are different to what they are in, say, Woolworths, Coles, petrol and convenience. But because we're specialist in that channel, all our resources fit that channel and its needs.
Right. Great. And is it different for you working in a business like that, running a business like that, compared to this, super structured career you had at Arnott's, or is there much the same?
Yeah, I think probably one of the learnings I've had over my career is dealing with customers, no matter who they are or no matter where they are, is actually pretty simple. What they're trying to do is drive loyalty for their customers to keep coming back and spending more, and make sure that they build their sales and their category business. Now, the levers that they might pull or the ways that they go about doing that can be different based on context, market, business situation. But ultimately, they're all trying to drive the sales and profitability of their business. And so, whether it was any of the customers I had throughout my time with Campbell Arnott's or the ones I've got now, that same principle applies. It's just the way we're playing the role is different because rather than being the brand owner, we represent the brands. But when we go to the customers, I top to tops of Metcash. I still go to those meetings the exact same way I went as a representative of my previous brand. It's just you're representing it in a different way because the ownership structures are a bit different, but the principles are exactly the same. What I would say the big difference is the resource base you work with. So while the principles and fundamentals are the same, you can't apply the level of resource that you can in a larger business. So I'll give you an example in a sort of an internal way, but if you think about an S&OP process, when I was at Arnott's, we would have multiple meetings a month with 20, 30 people, probably, collectively 30 hours of meetings that people would go and attend to run the S&OP process ongoing. And there'd be, a lot of people in each of those. The one we run in our business is 1 hour a month for 4 people. But the principles of what we look at are exactly the same. So I think it's that application of resource and how you spend it that is much different in the smaller environment.
So kind of getting that balance right is interesting. You've kind of got this same goals, same principles. You've been trained in how to do things very, very well. And you've got this smaller business, and I guess you want to apply those principles, but not slow it down.
Yeah.
How do you kind of achieve that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what you have to do is really focus on the outcome you're looking for. So, and this is probably something that's can be a challenge is how much is enough for me to know what I need to know? Because I think in any situation, you can get more data, more insights, more facts, better understanding, but your most precious commodity is time. And so you really have to apply it and go, what is enough for me to know what I need to know, and then have the discipline to stop. So, what are the key metrics that I need to keep a track of and make sure that they are in check? And, whether that be market metrics, financial metrics, whatever they might be. You get those key metrics, you hang on to them tight, you make everyone in the organization clear on what they are, and then you make sure that you know what's happening with those, and then you just have to be good enough to say enough's enough.
Right. And going forward, you describe what TCC is today. Is the vision to do more of the same, or what's the plan?
Yeah, I think when we look at our business, when we think about what we do well, this sounds a bit weird, but we do disorganized well. So, or decentralized well, not disorganized, that's not fair. So we do decentralized well. So we believe that being a specialist in that is our strength. So we will stay in that space and do it. Now, we look at some other channels that have, the similar characteristics that we might look to go into in the future. But for us at the moment, independent grocery is really the center point of where we think we can add value to the marketplace, right? Because it's not just about what we want to do, it's where can we add value to the marketplace. And we think that independent grocery is the place right now for us. Right.
Interesting. Okay, great. Now, I kind of want to come back and just kind of retouch on your career again, Imran. But this role, for you, it's quite a big shift, but it's into a general management type role. You're running a business is quite different. Is it come at the right time in your career? Would you have done it earlier, or is this does it feel logical?
I think look, I could have done it earlier in my career, but I think now is the right time for me to be successful at it. And it comes down to that experience base. I think when you look at the more and more into leadership you get, generally speaking, the broader and broader the things you have to do, the bigger the teams, and the more experience you need to be able to rely on to successfully navigate what's in front of you today. So I feel like for me, this was a great progression because for me, this business is still very heavily, even though it's a managing director role, it's still very heavily customer oriented. In terms of what we do. And so I found it, a great stepping stone to take that next step, but on the back of an experience base that was already, effectively operating at leadership levels for the best part of a decade already.
Yeah. Okay. Now, one of your mantras I've heard you talk about over the years is to, and it's the theme of this session, is to own your own development every day.
Yeah.
Now, talk me through what that means, and how would you kind of bring that to life and suggest someone applies that?
Yeah. It's been a mantra of mine my entire career, and it's something I've tried to communicate to people who are looking for development. I think when people, when you get into development discussions, they can be what I'd call quite sporadic. So, you'll sit down and have a development discussion once a month, or, you might be fortunate enough to go to some training courses. And, what they end up being is these points in time. And, when you see the learning curve, you sort of have this steep learning at that point while you have the discussion, and then it quickly drops away, and then you kind of get this injection of another one. And it's very sporadic over time. If you're really clear on your development areas, I firmly believe that every single day, in pretty much every single interaction, you can work on that development area. So I'll give you a real life example of it. So one of my development areas I had when I came back into a leadership role was my executive presence. So, when you're at the leadership level of an organization, you've got eyes on you, right? The organization is looking to you to guide, develop, direct, set cultural areas. So, you're being watched all the time, and, small things you do can have a huge impact on, your overall team or the overall business. And one of the pieces of advice I was given was you need to have the presence that is expected for people to be able to look at the head of sales and, have confidence in the direction you're setting. Now, I could have taken that and said, okay, well, can I have a training course on that, please? Like, can I talk to my manager about it once a month? But what I did is I said, right, every single interaction I have is an opportunity for me to work on that. So whether I was having a one-on-one with one of my direct reports, a one-on-one with someone from a different function, whether I was doing a communication piece, whether I was in a leadership meeting, every single one of those was an opportunity for me to do something different, try it out, see what worked, see what didn't in terms of my leadership. Now, what that meant is rather than over the course of the year, me having 12 touch points on my development plan, I was having 12 touch points a day. And, the feedback you get a couple of key people to feed back on it. And, you think about that, and my maths is going to be well off, but, you're getting something like 5,000 development opportunities a year versus 12 touch points. And, I think if you look at any research into learning and development, having that many repeated practices of your skills, you're going to develop far faster on that journey than you are just sort of waiting for the touch points. And I think for individuals, it's not hard. You just have to frame your mindset to go, if this is my development area, what are all the things in my day job that I could have a crack at doing something about that on? And if you take that, then it becomes this snowball effect where you're just getting multiple opportunities daily to address it, and then you just accelerate your own development.
I think that's really interesting. The key that I'm taking that is that you're not separating out development and your job.
No,
the two go hand in hand, and you're actually leveraging one for the other.
Exactly right. Because I think a lot of what I've witnessed over time is a lot of discussions are, here's my job, and my development is kind of over the top of it. And my experience on that is, if that's the approach, you'll make some progress, but it'll be slow. Those who go, here's my job, how can I action those development plans within that job? That's where I think you get the real power and speed of development and opportunity behind it.
Great. I want to finish off with a couple of pieces of advice from you. Now, you'll have met a lot of high performers throughout your career. I meet them every day, and some seem to struggle to make the transition from performance as an individual to leadership.
Yeah.
And what do you think enables that transition to happen effectively when it does?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I don't think people see as they're starting out, but you realize it pretty quickly when you get to that point, is you reach this inflection point in your career where it moves from what you do to how you lead others to do. And the skills that are required to do that is kind of like you move from IQ to EQ. And so, when you go to the people I've seen make the transition the most seamlessly, it's those that either have a high EQ and leverage it into those leadership roles, or those that sit there and go, hang on a minute, I need to develop those EQ skills and spend their time and effort developing the EQ skills. Because at the end of the day, if I'll use two extremes, you use an entry-level, say, sales analyst role, your success is dictated by what you do, right? You're in control of your workload. The outputs are predominantly sit with you and all yours. When you get to a managing director role, your success is not dictated by what you do. It's what however many people in your team or your organization do and the collection of that. So yes, while you're doing things, those doings are actually leading, developing, coaching, inspiring, accountability, all of these types of things, which are not the competency-based skills that actually get you through your first rungs of progression in your career. So for me, understanding that that's the shift you need to make and working on those skills, for me, is what I see in the best high performers being able to make that shift at the right time, and generally before they actually get to the leadership role. Because, when you're looking for talent, a lot of the time, the person you hire into those entry-level leadership roles hasn't been a leader before. So you're actually looking for the demonstration of those leadership skills in the context of their current role while they're not a leader, to have some confidence that when you put them there or into that role, that they'll actually be able to deliver against what's required.
Perfect. And that's going to be point number one for my next question, but I won't jump into it. Final question. So summing up, 3 pieces of advice that you would give those who aspire to be a managing director, looking at you and your role and think, I'd love to get there.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things they're going to focus on?
Yeah, that would be number one. So in terms of when you get to, be clear on how you're going to make that jump from contributing to leading, and how you're going to develop the skill sets required to be successful on that. The second one would be to own your own development. I had this manager in the US, Todd, and he had this phrase that was, nobody cares about your career or your development. And you'd be like, what do you mean no one cares? And he's like, nobody cares. And then, you kind of, I'm sure they do. But then when you got over that and you said, well, do they really? People will give you time. But if you really want to develop, like, your best friend's not going to sit there and drive your development. Your boss will support it, or your manager will support that journey, but they're not going to own it the way you do. So the only person who cares about your development as much, the person who cares about it the most is you. So own it and take accountability for it. And then the third one would be, along the journey, gather as many diverse experiences as possible. And I say that from a skills and experience base rather than, as we were talking about, like the role titles. I think, one of the things that I think gets lost in my 18-year journey at Arnott's is I actually look at it back as 7 different businesses and 3 different geographies. So while it was one company, it's actually the skills and experience beneath that I think has allowed me to, realize these aspirations. So, that would be the 3 things I'd give you advice for.
Thanks, Imran. That was really interesting conversation. Super level of detail and insight there, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And Imran's our 55th guest in the podcast, and the final for 2023. So 2022, sorry, we're not into 23 yet. You can catch everybody else on the previous 54 on the podcast, Your Future Sales and Marketing, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. Now our mission at AXR Recruitment and Search, as we said right at the start, to help you make great career decisions and to understand your pathways. I think this session has done a lot just to kind of map that out in terms of what those pathways are and how to prepare yourself to make those decisions. Now, for those of you new listeners who are not connected to me and my team, lots of stuff we're going to help you with, guys. We've got the salary guides coming out next year. We have a monthly report called the Sales and Marketing Collective, which is a who's who of the moves in the marketplace. A whole bunch of guides around helping you prepare for interview, etc. So as this year comes up to the end, and we've got looking into 2023, and there's a whole bunch of things you're thinking about in terms of career, things we can do to help you. So reach out for that conversation at any one time. Thanks again, Imran. That was awesome.
No problem. Appreciate you having me on.
And thanks to all my guests this year. And look forward to seeing you all back in the Sales Marketing Director Incubator in 2023. Cheers, guys.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more inspiring journeys and advice from Australia's sales and marketing leaders. You just can't get this career insight anywhere else. My name is Mike Dickson. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.